And we are back on the Build Phase podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Ben, and today we're going to talk about Build Phase League 11. The finals happened last night. I did live commentary for them. You can find that on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/buildphase. But I'm going to give kind of a rundown, my recollections of how the games went, and kind of talk a little bit about the whole experience. Now, BPL 11 was played in the Life Goes On format, and players were allowed to use whatever main characters they wanted throughout the event. The finals were no different. They were able to, I mean, any main character or any cards within the rules of the Life Goes On format, of course. So last night, Vern brought Dr. Doom, and Ashwan brought the pro registration Ms. Marvel. Just looking at the way that these characters matched up, you have to kind of give the advantage to Ms. Marvel. Historically speaking, in the game of Versus, the character that turns right and has kind of a linear combat based path to victory tends to do better than the defensively minded combo deck. Not always, not in every game, but generally speaking, at high level play, the linear decks tend to get it done. So we go into game one, and I think it was Patrick that observed that this is going to kind of come down to, does Doctor Doom see yellows so he can invent? Does Ms. Marvel see blue so she can get big old stacks of green counters on her? Like, who's going to get their game plan? And starting on turn one, Vern puts a yellow in the row. He invents. We're speculating about what he's going to get. The weapon seems like the most obvious choice. And then he passes the turn. Now, at this point, I don't know what the exact composition of Vern's hand was, but I have to feel like if he had a one drop, he probably would have played it in this situation, because probably the worst, craziest case scenario for Vern as he tries to play his combo deck and looks to go for the long game advantage. Osh plays a Riot on turn one and plays 50 State Initiative. Since Vern didn't recruit anything, Osh is in the position where he can draw those extra cards just by having one thing to play, and he had the one drop he needed. That 50 State chained into another 50 State, chained into another 50 State. So at this point, he's drawn 6 extra cards. Now, 3 of those 6 extra cards are just 50 State Initiatives. So it's not as explosive as just the raw number of 6 cards would be, but that's still a tremendous amount of card advantage. And you got to remember, with aggro decks, like, their weakness tends to be if you can break the back once, if you can take all the counters off once, if you can blunt their early aggression by the mid game, they tend to gas out. Well, now Osh has put himself in the position where he's not going to gas out. So going into the subsequent turns, Vern is still able to get off inventions. He's able to kind of fight for board, but at every moment where it seemed like he was really in a good position to take control of the game, Osh had the stupidest answers. There was one attack in particular where a melee attack was coming into Agony, and Osh played 2 copies of the Symbiote Codex and was able to give her, or no, into the main character. Sorry, Agony would have already had Symbiosis. So there was one attack where an attack went into Agony, and Codex came down, gave her Ferocious, and essentially ended the attack. There was another sequence, I think 2 turns or a turn later, where Ms. Marvel was being attacked and having exactly the 2 cards you need to give her Symbiosis, then give her Ferocious, so essentially bounce the attack. Just back-breaking stuff. So ultimately, game one ended with only 1 wound on Ms. Marvel, and that kind of looks, just looking at the wound count, that kind of looks like a blowout. And I mean, the final score being what it is, I would argue that at any given moment throughout the course of that first game, it was very close. Like, Vern multiple times was on the edge of being able to take control of the board. He had the Omega Machine in his deck. So there was a Dark Beast that came out on turn 2 for Vern, which is a card I'm a big fan of. He makes your equipment cheaper. And Vern proceeds to go into inventing or playing the Omega Machines. Now, this is a kit that doesn't see a lot of play. Hammer's not a team that's super widely played, and this is kind of a rickety contraption, but if you can get all the Omega Machines going, they all have different ways of putting -1 counters on opposing characters. The only one we saw from Vern, unfortunately, was the one that puts a -1 counter on a character, but even that, on the turn where Osh wanted to be able to hit the machine to clear it, he had to discard a power-up for the Riot or whatever character it was that he attacked into the machine, because the -1 counter would have killed him otherwise, and he wouldn't have been able to clear the machine off. So if you're in Vern's position, like even though you're behind on health, you expect to be behind on health. You're playing the combo deck. You're fighting against an aggro deck. And look, I was able to put -1 counters on all these characters. He had to discard a card from hand that chips away at that card advantage just to be able to get this machine off. Like, I don't know what the exact value calculation was, but if you think that Vern spent one recruit or however much the machines cost with the Dark Beast discount, I don't remember, it was free, or no, to a minimum of one. So he spends like one recruit point, and he put like -10 or -6, -6 worth of counters out there, plus forced a card out of hand from his opponent. Like, you got to feel good about that. So even though game one kind of ended with this lopsided score total, overall it was really well played on both players' parts and a lot of fun to watch. And it felt like it was on Tinderhooks the whole time. It was a very enjoyable experience. I honor calling the game. So we go into game two, and unfortunately in game two, Vern's deck just didn't show up to play. That's really all she wrote. I feel like he did the best he could with the pieces he had available, but at a certain point, the frustration of not getting anything, he got a little tilted. There was maybe not like the cleanest plays there in the mid game, and that's something that happens to all of us. That's not a knock on Vern. That's just, hey man, when your deck doesn't come to play, that can be a real bummer of experience, and the effect that has can kind of get compounded and force you, maybe force is the wrong word, but open the door for you to make plays that you otherwise would never do in a million years. So that was a little tough to watch. Game two was a little a little more legitimately lopsided, and that's just the way it goes sometimes in card games. So little bit of a disappointing finish to the overall series, especially with how tight and punchy that first game felt. But of course, congratulations to Ashuan for winning Build Phase League 11. Congratulations to Vern for making it all the way to the final table. Congratulations to the whole top eight, I suppose, as well as thank you to all of our players. Like, it's the people who participate in these events that make them fun and create these cool finals moments that we can talk about the next day. So if you like what we're doing here, you can support us at patreon.com/thebuildphase. I want to, by name, thank Brad, Jason, Justin, Patrick, Peter, Roland, and Patrick. If you would like to join the coolest clubhouse in Versus, patreon.com/thebuildphase. All right, till next time, go win some games.